I'm here at Balfes Bikes in Waterloo, and they have let me today film the Scotfoil RC, a bike that I've wanted to look at in person for a very, very long time. It does have some of the more interesting tube shapes and design, and for me, it's a bike that should look kind of ugly, but actually goes together really well. It's a surprisingly attractive bike. It's almost like a mishmash of parts and different shapes put together, but yeah, as a whole piece, it works really, really well. Obviously, it's a dark background with a dark bike, but when I bring you in closer, you'll be able to see everything. I am also going to weigh in the bike at the end as well, but this is the RC20 version, so it does come with the deeper wheels here, but it does come with a 105 group set, so don't expect it to be their lightest bike in the world. So just some normal stats before we get going. The bike is stated to be 16 watts faster than its previous generation, and this is obviously, the bike came out in 2023, so I'm obviously a little bit behind the times with getting this on video, but it's a number that's maybe believable. They say it's about a minute 18 faster over a 40k time trial. I would imagine that's probably those numbers at 50, maybe 55 kilometers an hour, because the previous Scotfoil was a very aerodynamic bike. The bike is also apparently 9% lighter than the previous generation for the frame and the fork. Now that comes from things like carbon layup, of course. It comes from producing bigger carbon pieces, so there's less carbon pieces itself on the bike, and apparently there's less joints as well. I don't know how you make less joints, but I imagine the carbon might cover multiple joints, or one sheet might, but that's how they've managed to get this bike a lot lighter. Then finally, they've made some compliance gains. When I get into closer details like the drop change stays and the seat posts and stuff, I can actually believe that one, especially when you stick some wider tyres on these more modern bikes. Modern aero bikes are now becoming more comfortable. So let's be honest, we do have to start with a seat post, and it is a 3-piece seat post, and I think this is quite a nice design, a really good way to build in compliance. So the main seat post itself is actually just this and this skinny part along the front, so you have more flex in the frame. This is a rubber piece, so this rubber piece can be taken off just like that. And you can see on the inside there, and you can see you get lots of flex from this, and obviously that's rubber, so it just flexes. This is just there to bolster the rest of this to the back. But you can put a light in here as a replacement. Now, that light is an optional extra. It's £40 here in the UK, but for something that's sleek and attaches on nicely, and you could just recharge it and chuck it back on your bike, I think that's a really nice solution, rather than having rubber going around the front. You have something that actually fits into your bike. The actual seat post clamp itself is covered by this cover to give it a sleeker look. Now it is a little bit fiddly to try and get underneath there and ping it off, but to access the bolt, but obviously when it's your bike, it's probably something you're only going to do a few times at the start, and then you're going to leave it as it is, so it just gives it a sleeker look there. For the bar and stem setup, because this isn't the top end model, we don't have the one-piece cockpit here, which is normally quite slim. For something that isn't a one-piece setup, this is very sleek and slim. And it's also nice to see that all the cables aren't fully integrated. You can see that they're threaded underneath the top here, so it gives you ease of maintenance, easier to move it and easier to change things out when you need to. Also, very interesting design here is hooked on the front and then clamped on the bottom there, and I think that just gives it a smaller frontal profile. So instead of having 2 bolts on the top here, it's basically you've managed to shave off the top, probably making the bike slightly more aero. I reckon there's less punishment for having these 2 bolts here, as they're blocking the wind to the stem there. Then when we get to the head tube, not the skinniest head tube in the world, but I mean about 2 fingers wide, so it is very slim as it is. The only way you can get slimmer is with that bayonet system, but as a whole piece, it does fit in very well together. So you can see the spacers have their own special cap that's sleekly fits into here, and then from the head tube to the fork, it sleekly slides in there, and you can barely see the connection at the top there. For the top tube itself, one of those parts that are very slim and skinny, and it looks rather cool, so it starts a bit thicker, and as pretty much every bike in the world does now, tapers off to a smaller tail section here. But yeah, very sleek, very sharp, very angular on there. For the fork itself, they've gone for the wider clearance. They're trying to get further away from the wheel, as lots of other bikes do. They have like this kind of bowed fork. Even the Factor has that kind of similar look. And then lots of depth on the fork here itself as well. Probably giving you a bit more sail effects when you're in side wind, so carry a bit more speed, and any air that tries to detach probably attaches easier back onto the fork. Once again, extremely skinny, narrower than one finger there. very sharp, very angular on the front and on the back. With the head tube there, obviously with the new relaxed rules, you can see just how deep that thing is. I mean, it's basically as wide as my hand. It's like a big paddle, so that will add to the sailing effect in crosswinds and stuff and keep airflow attached to the bike as well. But yeah, really deep, nice and slim. For the down tube, nothing crazy here. Probably the least interesting frame shape on this bike. Just a very round front, flat back end, and this does just fit normal bottle cages. We're seeing more and more bikes, such as the Trek over here, come with special bottle cages that try and make it more aerodynamic, but this bike just fine as normal bottle cages. Not much adjustability on the bottle cages. You get one position for the front and the rear, but one thing I do like is to see their own synchros bolts on there. I think it just ties the bike in together nicely. For the back, this is where we started to get into more interesting stuff. So first of all, drop seat stay. So the seat stay is not up here, it's down here, which should theoretically give a bit more compliance to the bike and make it slightly more aerodynamic. But instead of actually having like a piece that comes out the side here and then goes back, it basically looks like it's all one sleek piece on there, and it just basically hugs and hides the wheel quite nicely. The seat tube then kinks forward, very similar to the Cervelo S5, where it can hug that front wheel and just hide it a little bit better, or keep the rear wheel closer into the bike. The bottom bracket area, something I can only describe as thick and chunky. It is so deep. It's like the length of my hand going from here to here. And we now know filling in more of this area tends to be a bit more aerodynamic, and they've kept it skinny higher up here, but where they need the width, basically the chainstay carries on forwards and attaches into the bottom bracket area here. Keeps that bottom bracket area a bit wider, whilst also keeping a sleek transition into the chainstay. Now, the seat stay is one of the most interesting parts of this bike. So they are actually angled inwards to take air and throw it into the spokes. Now, this is what they said in their marketing. I'm not sure how that makes it faster. I'd imagine if you throw it to the spokes, the wheel can clean up the air behind it, but you can see, once again, very sharp, very angular, extremely thin, but you can see that the angle throws the air into the spokes there. It's not directly straight back, it's angled inwards, which is very, very unique. But it was found faster in their wind tunnel testing, so I'm sure it probably is. This bike, for this specific model, is paired with the Capital One Aero Synchros wheels, and, well, they're not their top-end wheels, so their top-end wheels, Synchros wheels, are very unique, very light. But these ones still have a good design on them. So they're wider than the tyre, which is good, following the rule of 105. You can really see that on the rear here. And I actually like the design of those wheels. Something a bit more U-shaped, a little bit wider, fitting a more modern tyre. Now, interestingly for this bike, the maximum tyre width is 30 millimeters stated. Even with the 28 on here, I'm going to try and find the angle for you. It is quite close to that chainstay. Personally, I probably would run a 30mm on the back if you could, or most tyres nowadays on the modern wheels blow out wider to 30, so if you buy a 28, they usually blow out to 30mm. I think, realistically, if your tyre blows out more on the very modern tyres, I'd say like 25mm internal, I reckon you'll just about get away with it. The 28 tyre will probably blow out to about 31, 32mm. I reckon I would personally risk it myself just to go for that wider tyre, especially on the rear here. On the front, you've got loads of space, so no issue there. That's just a personal thing I do. Obviously can't recommend it to you guys. If you want to remove the front derailleur, you can here. It is as simple as a bolt-on, so I'm sure you can get some covers if you want to run it 1x, but I suspect 99% of people run this bike 2x. Paint jobs, obviously they come in a number of paint jobs. My personal favourite one for this bike is the purple one, which I'll lay on the screen over now. This one here is like the Galaxy Sparkle. Now, a lot of people absolutely love the kind of Galaxy Sparkle paint job. For me, it reminds me of like 2005 Boy Racer, to be honest, and that's kind of ruined these paint jobs a bit for me. So it's not a personal favourite of mine, but there are other options. The one thing I do quite like is it's almost like a bar tape effect on the Scott logo down here, and then the foil logos are much more subtle. They're just nice and sleek on the bike there in silver. Obviously, you would have to remove some of these stickers to keep the bike looking good, but your UCI sticker there as well. All right, let's weigh this thing in. Like I said, it's probably not going to be as light as you hoped with 105 Di2 on there, but you can run mechanical on this bike if you want to get that weight down further. This is obviously with no stem, no pedals. I've got 8.19 kilos, and this is a frame sized large, so something more for my kind of height. It is a bigger frame. Generally speaking, if you want to change out a lot of these components, especially if you bought a higher end model with a one-piece bar and stem, lighter carbon layup on the frame, lighter wheels as well, and obviously a lighter group set, you're probably going to save almost a kilo there. Realistically, with pedals, this bike might be, for a size large that I've got here, for a top end model, maybe around 7.2, 7.3 kilos, which I think's surprisingly impressive, especially for a bike with tube shapes this deep. So I think they've done a really good job there. There it is, guys, the Scotfoil RC, a bike that you really don't see much here in the UK. I would like to see more of them. I would like to get my hands and ride one of these because it's a really, really cool looking bike, and I suspect it probably rides very fast. Comfort to be determined by riding it. But yeah, a bike I'd like to see a little bit more of in the UK. Anyway, guys, what do you think? Do you own one? Do you know what it's like? Let me know in the comments below. I've been Jason. This has been Cycling Unboxed. See you in another video.